Well, thank you everyone for coming today. We're here at the second scoping meeting for the proposed Nicasio Spillway Modification Project. My name is Alicia Irish. I am the engineering planning manager at the district, and I'm also the project manager for this project. I'm joined here today with Sean Horn, our Director of Watershed Resources at the district, and Jill Hamilton, from ESA, who's helping us with the environmental review process. Also here with Tara Higgins, who will be helping administer the Zoom here. So today we have about a 20-minute presentation to share with you. And then we wanted to make sure that we left ample time for all comments from anybody wishing to provide an oral comment today. The scoping period for this project is open until August 4th at 5 p.m. And you're welcome to provide a written comment to me by mail or email until that time. And we'll have some slides depicting the contact information for that. So I think we're just going to get started today. If you are here last Thursday, the presentation will be the same and the information presented will be the same. And if you've already provided a comment, that comment has been recorded. So this is not needed to be repeated, but we're welcome to hear it again as well. So I'm going to share my screen and then we'll get going. We good? Thumbs up, Tara? Okay, so I think we're sharing the screen here. So welcome. This is the second scoping meeting for the EIR process for the proposed Nicasio Spillway Modification Project. I'll be passing this off to Jill to give some information on the purpose and overview.
Great. Thanks, Alicia. So on April 30th, Marin Water published a notice of preparation that basically informed people that Marin Water intends to prepare an environmental impact report, or EIR, pursuant to the California Environmental Quality Act, and is seeking input from regulators, the community, and any other interested parties on the scope and content of the EIR. And so that's the purpose of this meeting, is really to hear from you. We'll start by sharing some basic information about the proposed project and provide some context in terms of the California Environmental Quality Act and the EIR process. And then we want to hear from you regarding issues you'd like to see addressed in the EIR. We invite you to share your thoughts on existing conditions, impacts of the project that you perceive, and any suggestions for alternatives that you may have. So just a few things on providing comments. As Alicia mentioned, this is the second in 3 scoping meetings that we're having. You can choose to make oral comment after the presentation today, or you could join the scoping meeting on July 15th. Or you can submit comments in writing, again, by 5 p.m. on August 4th. And Alicia's email address and regular address is shown on this slide. It's also included on the notice of preparation, which is available on the project website. So this is just our agenda for the day. Alicia will provide an overview of the proposed project, talk a little bit about public outreach to date and what lies ahead. I'll describe the overall environmental review process and the topics we'll be addressing in the EIR, and then we'll open it up to public comment. Alicia.
Thanks, Jill. So just to give an overview of the proposed project, the proposed Nicasio Spillway Modification Project is a Marin Water project. Marin Water is the utility provider of potable water for Southern and Central Marin County. We serve over 190,000 people, over a 147 square mile service area. The service area extends to Novato in the north, Sausalito in the south, the Bay onto the eastern border, and then into the San Geronimo Valley on the western side. 75% of the water that customers receive is from the district's 7 local reservoirs, 5 of which are in the service area, which is depicted in the medium green shade on the right. And then there are excuse me, also two other local reservoirs in western Marin County. The other 25% that the customers receive of water is from Sonoma Water, and that is conveyed through the Russian River or North Marin Aqueduct from the Cotati area into the Novato area, and it hits the Ignacio treatment plant at that point to enter into our service area. So um, now getting more into the specific project, there were two main drivers that led us to this proposed project today. One was the changing climate conditions that we've been noticing. Um, Typically, or in the past, the district has seen a very predictable amount of rain in a predictable amount of time. But now we're seeing that those storms are changing. They're more intense. They can come closer together, they can come farther apart, or they cannot come at all. As we saw in 2021 when the district and the region experienced an historic drought, second only to the drought in 1976 and 1977. In this drought in 2021, the district became within months of running out of potable water to serve to its customers. And that spurred the Strategic Water Supply Assessment, which was completed in early 2023 and concluded with the district's water supply roadmap. There were five main components to this roadmap, the first of which is the spillway modifications for storage enlargement, namely this proposed Nicasio project, but the district is also looking at the feasibility of doing spillway modifications at three of its other reservoirs. Second, there's a water efficiency component. So how can we use less water? Namely, two main projects in this component are AMI, or Advanced Metering Infrastructure, which the district is looking to fully implement and roll out within the next 3 to 4 years, and also water loss control. So we know that there is some water that's lost throughout our system, and how can we improve or lessen that water loss? The third component is conveyance, namely regional conveyance, such as the Atmospheric River Capture Project, which we'll be talking a little bit about later today. There's also in-district improvements, so projects such as the Suluhuli Electrification Project or the Suluhuli Pipeline, which would allow for more operational efficiency in conveying water from Suluhuli Reservoir into our system. And then there's also other projects. These have to do with things like Kent Storage Enlargement or the Phoenix to Bontempi project. So this specific project is looking to increase the height of the spillway at Seeger Dam, which is the dam on Nicasio Reservoir. The district is looking to install an inflatable rubber gate across the span of the reservoir, which is 280 feet long. The proposed height of this gate is about 4.4 feet, which would add approximately 3,700 acre-feet of storage to this reservoir. This would increase the district's local water supply by about 5%, as the district's current supply is just under 80,000 acre-feet. This alternative also provides flexibility to raise or lower the spillway gate as needed throughout the year. Now to go into some public outreach and our community engagement. The district has been very committed to providing or conducting outreach and community engagement since we started this project in late 2024. You can see here the formal meetings that we've had with our regulatory agencies, district board briefings at the planning committee, meetings with the Lagunitas Technical Advisory Committee, as well as the Nicasio Landowners Association and Nicasio School Board. And all of these meetings are in addition to the numerous informal conversations and meetings that staff have had with property owners, regulatory agencies, and other interested parties. It's been very important to us to learn information, understand what people are thinking as it relates to this project, and try to come to a common understanding as we move forward throughout the project process. We've really heard two main concerns identified to date, one being upstream of the reservoir and the other being downstream of the reservoir. Upstream concerns have to do largely with existing localized conditions. and how the effects of the proposed project due to the increased water surface elevation may have an effect on properties, utilities such as wells and septic systems, community schools, and roads in the area around the reservoir. The district is currently conducting hydrologic modeling of the two main upstream tributaries of Nicasio and Hallett Creeks to better understand these conditions and come to a common understanding with the community to really understand those channel dynamics and those localized flooding. In addition to this hydrologic modeling, we'll also be taking sediment samples to develop a parallel sediment transport model to better understand how the sediment is moving through the system as well as the water. Downstream of the reservoir, there are also concerns. These namely have to do with biological resources. So Seeger Dam, downstream of which is Nicasio Creek, and that goes for about 1 mile before meeting the confluence of Lagunitas Creek and then going out into Tamales Bay. So the district is currently conducting various environmental surveys and fishery surveys, as well as uh, boundary surveys and looking at studies to be prepared, looking at the various areas that these studies should take place in. We're currently not just looking at areas in Nicasio Creek, but also in the lower part of Lagunitas Creek after it meets with Nicasio Creek and conducting those surveys. Those have been taking place. They started in late 2024 and are now continuing through this calendar year. So as we've been doing early outreach, we want to continue doing outreach and we plan to. We're currently at the May 27th scoping meeting. As Jill mentioned, there's also a third scoping meeting on July 15th at the same time from 1 to 3 p.m., a virtual meeting. This morning, we conducted a district board briefing at the May 27th Planning Committee, where there was some landowners present that provided comments, which was very useful for our board. And we also plan to continue conducting regular meetings with these same groups, the regulatory agencies, the Lagunitas Technical Advisory Committee, as well as the Landowners Association and the school board. Now Jill's going to briefly go over the environmental review process.
So the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, requires agencies like Marin Water to consider the environmental consequences of their projects before they approve them. That includes identifying measures and alternatives to reduce any significant environmental impacts. CEQA also facilitates public and agency involvement in project planning through meetings like this one, as well as document review. Marin Water is the lead agency for this project and this EIR. They are the agency with primary responsibility for carrying out the requirements of CEQA. But other agencies like the California Department of Fish and Wildlife and Regional Water Quality Control Board also play a role in the CEQA process. As do community members that choose to participate by providing input on the scope of the document or document review. So this slide depicts the overall process for preparing an EIR, and we're at the far left where the dark blue shapes are shown in the scoping process. The publication of the notice of preparation initiated the formal scoping period. And during this period, we'll hear comments from you, and we'll get written comments up until August 4th. And at the close of the scoping period, we'll consider all the comments and determine what that means for the scope and content of the EIR and the studies that we need to do, including the hydrologic and hydraulic studies and sediment transport studies that Alicia spoke about. We'll also do investigations of other resource topics like archaeological resources and historic resources. So as we wrap up those studies, we'll prepare the draft EIR, which is depicted in the orange shapes in the middle. Once the draft EIR is complete, we'll publish that document and circulate it for agency and public review. We'll have additional public meetings at that time to explain the findings in the environmental document and hear comments on the document. At the close of the public comment period on the draft EIR, we'll start preparing written responses to all of the comments that we've received. We'll also determine what changes are needed to finalize the environmental impact report. Then we'll publish the final EIR. And if you're on the distribution list, you will be notified of the availability of the draft EIR and then the final EIR as well. So it's after publication of the final EIR that the Marin Water Board of Directors will consider whether the EIR is complete and satisfies the requirements of CEQA. And if they certify the EIR, then they could take an action to approve the project. Although they're not the only agency that needs to approve the project, agencies like those I mentioned earlier, California Department of Fish and Wildlife and the Regional Board, those and other agencies have approval authority over the project, and their approvals would need to be secured before the project could then be implemented.
And before we move on, I just want to emphasize that we're taking a very process-driven approach to this. There's no timeline that we have at this point as to when that draft EIR would be available. I know in previous meetings we may have had some timelines associated with these documents, but we want to make sure that we're doing a very robust and thorough investigation of all of the issues that we've heard so far and may still hear before we perhaps rush forward into trying to complete the EIR process.
So this slide just depicts what you can expect to see in the EIR. The executive summary is always a good place to start because it will summarize all of the significant impacts as well as the mitigation measures identified throughout the report. Other sections in the document will describe the environmental setting, impacts, and then mitigation measures identified to reduce those impacts. There will also be a chapter on alternatives considered to avoid impacts as well. So on the next slide, this is a list of all of the general topics that will be addressed in the EIR, but for any one of these topics, there are a number of subtopics as well. So surface water, groundwater, and water quality will have a robust analysis. It will pull in and incorporate the findings of the hydrologic and sediment transport modeling that's done for the project. It'll consider effects during construction as well as during operations. And I'm not going to talk about all of these, but I do want to spend a little time talking about cumulative impacts. So as Alicia mentioned, Marin Water is considering other projects, and I want to talk a little bit about two of those. The first is the Atmospheric River Capture Project, which is a pipeline between the Sonoma water system to Nicasio Reservoir. Right now, Marin Water doesn't have the ability to store water that it acquires from Sonoma Water through its contract. So it has to use the water when there is the demand and when that water is available. And Marin Water can't take advantage of when there are atmospheric rivers and excess water is available. This atmospheric river capture project would allow them to convey water from such storms to Nicasio Reservoir. There's also a project to complete the Suluhuli pipeline. There's a pipeline from the Suluhuli Reservoir to the north to Nicasio Reservoir. And right now it only goes about half or 2/3 of the way between the reservoirs. And then the pipeline empties out into a drainage and the water surface flows through that drainage to Nicasio Reservoir, but there are operational inefficiencies associated with that. So there's a proposal project to complete that pipeline to Nicasio Reservoir. So while these projects can be implemented independently of each other, The ARC project and the Suluhuli pipeline projects, if approved, would change how Marin Water manages water in Nicasio Reservoir. So in the Nicasio Spillway Modification Project, EIR, we'll look at scenarios both with and without these other projects and any other projects proposed by others that could contribute to cumulative impacts, so that we're fully disclosing what does it mean for the environment if these projects are approved, what does it mean if they're not approved.
Thanks,
With
Jen.
that, go ahead.
So that really takes us to the comment period, which is why we're here today. So before we open up to comments, just a couple of housekeeping comments. For one, the notice of preparation, which includes the project description, is available on our project website, www.marinwater.org/spillway modifications. In just a minute, we'll be opening up the room to oral comments. And just wanted to restate that any member of the public can provide a written comment on this project until 5 p.m. August 4th, 2025, for it to be a formal comment. These comments can be sent by mail or email to my contact information shown here on the slide. And it's also in the notice of preparation as well as on the project website. So, but as we go through the public comments, please raise your hand if you would like to provide an oral comment at this meeting. That will show us that you are in the queue, and we will call your name in the order that the hands were raised. When you are called upon, we ask that you please state your name or organization. We are providing a 5-minute limit on oral comments today. This isn't to cut anyone off preemptively, but it's really to allow ample time for everybody that wants to provide a comment to be able to do so. We do have a limited ability to respond to questions during the meeting, but as we're looking for input on the project and comments that we've seen that have been productive are on other projects are things such as issues you would like to see addressed in the EIR, any input on the affected uses, resources, or utilities, any suggestions you may have for alternatives or measures to reduce the environmental effects, or perhaps any comments you may have on the schedule and outreach process. So with that, again, please raise your hand using the raise hand button towards the bottom of the Zoom screen, and Tara will call on you in the order received. Tara, we can't hear you. No, we can't hear you. Sorry, everyone. The computer's having a Monday, I think.
Me?
Yeah, thank you.
We'll start comments with George F, then Monica S, then Casey. George, I've unmuted you.
He might need to unmute himself. Is that
Oh
possible?
yeah, George, you're unmuted. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is George Foreman. I live on Lucas Valley Road in Nicasio, have since 1977. I've seen dramatic changes in Nicasio Creek over those many years, particularly during high water flows. And I really appreciate the opportunity to provide input to the district as it goes forward with this process. I know that having just spent a great deal of ratepayer money in the unsuccessful defense against the CEQA challenge on a recent MMWD decision concerning bicycles on single tracks. I'm sure that the district wants to get this EIR process done right. The essence of the CEQA process is to give the decision maker the basis for making the choice that has the least adverse impact on the environment, absent a finding of overriding considerations, which I don't think could be made in this instance. the essential part of that process is meaningful consideration of alternatives to what is identified as the preferred alternative. So often in these processes, the lead agency has blinders on. Having looked at Nicasio Reservoir over the years, from cracked mud to spilling on the dam, and watching what is undoubtedly a great deal of evaporative loss during the summer, I would strongly encourage consideration of doing something similar to what is proposed for the Nicasio Dam to Peters Dam at Kent Lake. Because doing that, A, would limit evaporative losses, B, and most, I think, important to the Nicasio community, would avoid having any impacts on adjacent landowners, whether it be the school or the people who live along Halleck Creek, whose property will be inundated during high water periods when this inflatable dam is in place. And generally would be, I think, an alternative that warrants very serious consideration, because it would not have the kind of human impacts that the proposed Nicasio project would have, and I think altogether would be a more efficient way to operate the district system. Thank you.
Thank you, George.
Next, we have Monica S. Monica, you've been unmuted.
I think Monica needs to unmute herself. I can't hear her anyway.
Did you hear anything yet?
No,
We
thank you.
can hear you now.
We just heard you.
Hello, my name is Monica Siebold. I have lived in my home in Nicasio since 1996. I want to personally thank Alicia and Sean for their time and availability to listen and view our flooding concerns. Over the last decades, I have watched my property erode into Nicasio Creek as the sediment decreases the depth of the creek and the water runs well over the banks. In many areas, we have lost over 20 feet of bank. We have provided you video and photos of the flooding and erosion. How many rainy seasons will the hydrological modeling and the sediment settling be studied? Larry Russell mentioned not putting a hard stop on the project while waiting for rainy season data. I would like to have story poles showing the inundation to my private land. That still doesn't give me the additional flood heights I need. Who then will address all the septic system's required setbacks, as the water now will inundate our yard much closer to these vital utilities? What is the maximum height of this spillway gate? If 100% inflated, could the proposed rubber gate exceed 4.4 feet? It would then be easy to speculate further inundation to Nicasio at your convenience, possibly a later piecemeal of the ARC project. The plan includes cutting down the spillway by a foot, so fully deflating bladders would result in less water storage than we currently have. Can you please elaborate on what Larry Russell brought up about the beauty of the rubber gate and the discussion of not lowering the gate, but waiting for 5 feet of water to collapse the gate? Is that for a total of 9.4 foot rise before water is released? I have read the Tempe disaster and of other rubber gates having failure in deflation as well as ruptures. There is no centralized database tracking rubber spillways in the US. Dredging of the creek was something MMWD provided for sediment accumulation or backwater curve well into the 90s. The refusal to dredge the creek for the last 30 years of sediment is creating flooding for us. MMWD has made us aware they can't fix the flooding unless maybe it is tied into this dam elevation. Will you continue to be derelict in the responsibility to remove sediment and maintain MMWD property? Will there also be a refusal to lower the spillway when it is just our community underwater, a community not served by Marin Water? Current lack of action for decades may be the best predictor of future responses by Marin Water. If we allow access to our land for studies, will we be allowed real-time reports? Will we be allowed the 2018 depth measurement of the reservoir versus when it was built? And most concerning of all is who will pay for the new septics and wells needed, the flood insurance, the loss of acreage and land use, the structure damage. Who is responsible for the reduced value of my home? Will you make my private land uninhabitable when you have 5 reservoirs on Marin Water land? Are there mitigations planned for the affected homeowners, residents, and land? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Monica.
Next, we have Casey.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we
Yes.
can.
Okay, great. Thanks to George and Monica. Both of your points were right on. I've already brought up a lot of the flooding and erosion, creek rising and all of that since 1987, since we lived here. But I specifically listened to this morning's board meeting and had a few comments and questions. They talked about staking inundation areas along the creek. That would change every year as the creek bed rises since it's not being dredged. The markers will also wash away of the first heavy rain. They talked about surveying boundaries. Are you talking about our property boundaries or some boundary the water department thinks they have? I don't see any need to survey our property lines. They have assessor parcel maps for that, and we don't want them trying to redefine our parcels. They mentioned that surveying along the creek would start this Thursday. Some of our most affected neighbors are out of town until July, so I don't believe permission has been granted to go on their property, as well as some others. They say this project will benefit our community, but we don't see how that's possible. The fish situation is almost comical, since salmon and steelhead have not been able to come upstream in Nicasio and Halleck Creek since the dam was built. Not to mention the mercury levels posted at the reservoir now. We don't want that in our backyard and contaminating our wells. Thanks for listening and hopefully addressing these questions and concerns in the near future. Thanks.
Thank you, Casey.
Next, we have Elizabeth P. Elizabeth, I've unmuted you.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks. My name is Elizabeth Patterson. I own a property in Nicasio, 2 farms that are both on the creek, one at 2800 Nicasio Valley Road, and one is right along where there would be some serious inundation from the elevated reservoir. It's across from the school, so I can really tell how much additional water there would be in the area and the impact that would have. I'm concerned about a couple of things. I understand how we need to think about where our water's coming from, but I think we aren't considering some other issues that we all have concerns about in our area. One is the risk of fire in our area, and the other is the flooding that occurs. So we are bound to see more extreme weather conditions that will lead to both drought, fire, and flooding. And I'm just concerned that this issue really is very focused on lack of water and not thinking about the other 2 scenarios. One concern I have is sedimentation that's occurred. I was wondering what the capacity of the reservoir was when it was built and how much of that capacity has been taken up by sedimentation. I do see on my property that's at 2800 Nicasio Valley Road, further upstream from the reservoir, that there have been significant erosion issues in the time period that I've been familiar with that farm. There have been several major erosion issues in the last 10 years. One was a bank of the stream sloughing off and had to be repaired. One was a culvert on the property that was damaged in rain and caused a lot of sedimentation at that time. So I really do think that there are some issues upstream that will need to be addressed to really tackle this problem of sedimentation. Because I think that has a huge impact on the flow of water and also the fact that there's less capacity maybe in this reservoir, but I'd love to have more information on that and how we can prevent those erosion episodes. The other is the fire risk. The whole area that looks like it would be underwater is now very, very overgrown with willows and other trees. It's really inaccessible. And if we just increase the amount of water, I think we're going to get more vegetation that's unmanaged that will, in dry years, be a fire hazard. And I just am wondering what the plan is for managing vegetation along the banks of the reservoir, because there are many, many areas where there's been no grazing, there's overgrowth of some very flammable plant material. And I think before we can think about increasing water capacity, we have to think about the impact that will have on fire risk in our area, because that's a big concern for many of us. My other concern is just another related to fire, is that that area is totally inaccessible. There was a fire recently along the reservoir, and if it had been anywhere farther away from the road, I just don't know how you would get in with equipment to fight those fires. So there's a lot of land there that is inaccessible and would be made more inaccessible by having more water in the area. So I think the other question I have is how this would impact our own local water system, since we don't rely on the reservoir for water. What impact would it have on our groundwater? What impact would it have on our wells? And what impact would it have on our ability to get the water we need for both people and for agriculture in our area? Let's see. I think I'd love to also be looking at other positive solutions, one of which would be improving soil health. By improving soil health, we can expand the amount of water that our soils will hold, and then hopefully slow down the rate at which it goes into the reservoir. And if we had a broader view of how we can improve our watershed by decreasing erosion and improving soil health, adding compost to some areas around the reservoir, I think it could potentially be helpful in improving the water capacity, the holding capacity of the reservoir. And anyway, I think that's all. I'd love to get your ideas and hear more about what the hydrological studies show. But I also want to emphasize that I think we really need to think about our school children. And if the school is impacted by this, I think we need to really find a way to, protect the future generation from what impact this might have on them. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Next, we have Michael S.
Hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
So first, I'd like to thank MMWD for extending the public comment period. I also want to thank all the previous speakers. By extending this, it allows many of directly affected residents to gather the appropriate materials, including pictures, statements, histories, as well as requests from the Marin County Department of Public Works. As a directly affected homeowner living on Nicasio Creek for almost 30 years, there are numerous issues that negatively impact my property and the property of my neighbors on the creek. Directly affecting my property is my septic, my well, the erosion of the creek bank, reducing the size of the property, reducing my home values, and the inundation of Nicasio with mosquitoes. This inundation will most likely force us to have flood insurance costing us approximately $5,300 per year. not okay for somebody that can't use the water. How is MMWD going to address these specific concerns? How is MMWD going to pay for the damage to property values, wells, septic, tree damage? We need a commitment. And let's be clear, none of the proposed water storage and inundation is available to the residents of Nicasio. In the notice of preparation, MMWD states that they are investigating the adverse effects to roadways, culverts, utilities, including water and septic, as it may result in the relocation or reconstruction of such. If new septic is needed, they are mound systems and the setbacks that currently will move most residents to have new systems because the inundation will most likely put it within the 100 to 200 foot of water supply of any reservoir. That's a Marin County code. Any new system will make more of my property unusable. Can we see the status of the current investigations and findings from DPW? And the potential damage to the culverts and other utilities mentioned in the NOP. Can MMWD explain the relationship between the Solahuli Reservoir, Nicasio Reservoir, and the newly funded conveyance? These projects must be connected in some way to help solve the 20% storage increase. Solahuli has known mercury contamination problem. What happens when this hits Nicasio? What is the petition for the temporary changes to diversion requirements as mentioned in the NOP? How does this petition affect this project and residents of Nicasio? MMWD wants to flood my backyard with approximately 4.5 feet of water. MMD is currently only considering the dry years. Recently, any moderate to severe rainstorms, the water flows well over the boundaries of the creek. As this water overflows the boundaries, it has been pulling down trees and moving huge amounts of gravel and silt downstream to the reservoir. The base level of the creek bed has risen numerous feet in the last 20 years. MMWD has done absolutely zero maintenance to prevent the water from flowing over its banks. Requests to this have gone unanswered. MMWD has visited our property. Numerous pictures and posters, both past and present, were shown to address the dire flooding concerns that all residents currently face. And we are directly told that if they do not get the go-ahead with this project, MMWD will not fix any of the current sediment buildup problems. MMWD needs to focus on correcting existing flooding problems and the damage that has been done over the past 30 years of abusive neglect. This neglect has allowed the creek to fill in. As it fills, the creek becomes significantly wider, reducing my over property and causing more damage year after year. If my backyard has been filling with sediment, surely the reservoir has been doing the same. We were told that in 2018, a study that accurately measures the water capacity of the reservoir was completed. Will MMWD conduct a more recent sonar type study? Is the 2018 study available to the public? Fix the flooding problem before you even consider the storage problem. When can I show the board members all of the flooding problems with my pictures? In the construction of the proposed spillway modification project, MMWD will grind off approximately 1 foot of concrete to fit the proposed balloon. If the balloon fails or needs repair, water drops that decreased foot. How often does the balloon need to be maintained? Who is responsible, or will MMWD be neglectful like it has been to the residents of Nicasio? Look how poorly they have maintained their current property at the reservoir, shore full of trash and garbage compared to the pristine waters and shores of the Mount Tam watershed. Why are there restrictions on eating the fish from these bodies of water, but not the waters of Mount Tam? Historians have stated that this reservoir was built too shallow to be effective as much of this water evaporates. Why did MMWD abandon the previous planned inflatable bladder to Phoenix Reservoir? This increased water supply proposal is about more than just climate change. Much of it has to do with more than 4,000 currently proposed residential living projects. How much more can Marin Water System handle if in 2021 we were within 6 months of water? Is MMWD actively seeking eminent domain options? Seems like MMWD needs to invest in the long-term solutions, increase the height of the Kent Dam. This will only affect MMWD land. MMWD needs to invest in desalinization. We are told it's too costly, but it solves every problem currently MMWD is facing. More than enough water to Marin now and in the future increase of population. It fixes Marin's reliance on purchasing expensive Russian River water, but not affected by climate change. It could even solve Navalo's resilience on the Russian River water. In summary, the spillway project to the Nicasio Dam is going to produce negative and disastrous impacts to numerous families and homes of Nicasio. Home values, property values, septic systems, wells, contamination, and property will all be damaged. MMWD has not been a good neighbor in the past. I do not trust that they will be a good neighbor in the future. Find better options, find long-lasting solutions. The easiest and least expensive is not always the best answer. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Next, we have Claire C. Claire, I've unmuted you.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, well, I'm Claire Costello and I've lived in Nicasio for 30 years. I live close to the dam and oversee the Nicasio Reservoir. And I really do appreciate this opportunity to talk with you. I'm just getting aware of the situation, so I really appreciate the previous speakers and all of your, introduction. I just wanted to make you aware of something you might not know yet. I looked at the map. I don't see my property parcel on the map. It's not even there. So it's hard for me to determine how much or whether it would be affected. But I have a spring that's located on Marin County land. The Marin Water District is aware of this. I've had communications with them in the last few years, recently actually. The original owner of my property donated that land to Marin Open Space, 21 acres or so, under the jurisdiction that the spring rights of those 21 acres belongs to this property. But also it identifies that if there's any changes to that land, if anything happens to it that isn't what it was originally set out, then those 21 acres would return to the property of 2 Dam Road. So I wanted you to know that because I'm trying to understand how the increase in water may or may not affect that spring, which is really important to all of us up on this hill off of Laurel Canyon Road, because in my eyes, it's a spring that I use every day, but it's also, I think of it, I have water stored for the event of fire. So I really appreciate Elizabeth bringing up the issue of fire. I feel it is a protection for my whole community for fire in the event of that. So again, the other piece is that spring down below there is probably very important to wildlife. The deer, the fox, the red-legged frogs, because it's so close to right there. So I'm concerned about the wildlife who depend upon it as well. But so anyway, I just wanted to let you know about that, and if there's anything that you need from me or if I need to understand and know, I'd really appreciate being able to understand the map, because the parcel number is not on that map. My other neighbors' parcel numbers are. Okay, that's all I have to say, but thank you so much for everybody's work and effort to try to bring more enlightenment into what's going on and try to preserve our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire.
Next, we have Martha D.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Martha Davis. I'm speaking today as a Nicasio resident. My family has lived in Nicasio for almost 50 years. And today I want to speak about some of the studies Marin Water needs to implement as part of developing the EIR for the Spillway Modification Project. So earlier today at the Planning Committee, Marin Water briefly identified the array of studies that they will be starting later this year. So it's hydrology, hydraulic, erosion, sediment transport studies. And I was pleased to hear that on the Nicasio Creek, you're going to be looking all the way up to the creek, as far as, at least at this point, to Lucas Valley Road, where it crosses Lucas Valley Road. So that should give you a fairly holistic view of what's going on within that system. One of the key comments I wanted to make today is how important it is that data be collected in real time to calibrate the various models that are being developed to assess the serious, the flooding and all the other issues. And in order to do this, you really need real-time data. The gauge data is something you're going to be putting in the gauges later this year, but you're going to also need other real-time data to just validate the accuracy of the models that you're developing. And I hate to say it, but I think that's going to be not just 1 year's worth of data. I think it's going to be multiple years. Or you need to have your consultants explain to us how they really plan to validate those models if they don't have the real-time data. Other Nicasio and Halleck Creek studies that are needed include biological monitoring of the creeks and springs, such as what Claire just raised on her side of the reservoir. So we need to be looking for the endangered sensitive species, California red-legged frog, and the other ones. And again, these studies have to be conducted over a longer period of time because you want to capture all the seasons in which the species are using these waterways. On the issue of costs, it will be important to secure additional cost information to compare the cost of the spillway modification with other alternatives. I realize that you're still midstream in developing this information, but currently the projected costs that are shared with the public and with the board really reflect and just account for the installation of the spillway modification, but not for all the research costs now that are going into the project, much less what it's really going to cost to mitigate the impacts, particularly on the Nicasio's community. I've also heard staff referred to the rubber dam as being the preferred alternative. And I think what you mean by this is that you've looked at various ways to raise Nicasio Dam, and your preferred technology is the inflatable rubber dam. I think it's really important that the correct question for the purposes of the EIR, just so that we're all clear and on the same page, is whether the level of the reservoir should be raised, and if so, by how much. So right now we're proposing to raise the spillway by 4.48 feet. Ruth always corrects me on my math. And Marin Water staff have assured Nicasio residents that the spillway would be operated in such a way to guarantee that the reservoir level would never rise higher than 5.48 feet. So there's some operations questions in here that we all just need to better understand. What is the correct range in which you would be operating? What does it mean to operate it within that range? How would you provide the guarantees that whatever the height of you'll never go past, whatever that height is, how do you guarantee it? And so there's a lot of concern that there's a lot of moving parts to this particular aspect of the operation of the spillway that need to be explained and to be validated that the guarantees really can be fulfilled. I do think that it's important, and I think I said this once before, that the Marin Water, as part of the development of the EIR, actually show us incrementally, if you raise the spillway a foot or 2 feet or 3 feet, at each of those increments, what are the associated impacts and what are the associated benefits for Marin Water. Finally, we do talk about the spillway project as providing drought benefits. But as other people have raised today, clearly the way the project is operating, it is to capture wet season water, which actually limits the yield or carryover benefits in dry years. I believe your estimates right now of these drought benefits range from 500 and 750 acre feet. And it's the yield benefits that are going to be really the most important comparable what should be compared as an alternative to what are the other drought yield benefits of other projects. So volume of water is a concept, but it is not operationally what gives you the yield coming out of the Nicasio storage. They're going to benefit the ratepayers, the customers, but particularly the issue of what does it mean for dry year yield. Just as a comparison, I think somebody earlier referenced the importance of other projects. I think particularly the opportunities to develop 500 to 750 acre feet through reducing the system-wide pipeline leaks, where you currently show about 9,000 acre feet a year being lost annually, is a really important alternative to make sure it is fully fleshed out. And I just want to close. I noticed today in the planning meeting, there was a reference to 18 properties being surveyed. And I wasn't clear on whether that was an increase of properties from the list that was included in the notice of preparation. So it would be helpful to understand if additional properties have been added onto your list of properties that are going to be surveyed and potentially impacted. Thank you very much for your consideration of my comments.
Thank you, Martha.
Unless anyone else has a comment, those are all of the comments.
Okay, I see there's a few people just watching today, which is totally okay. If you think of a comment after this meeting, feel free to send me an email or send me a letter. We will be having another one of these meetings on July 15th at the same time. If you are on the distribution list, you were sent the links previously. If you would like to be on the distribution list going forward, please let me know. I did receive an email during this meeting that someone would like to be added, so please just let me know. We are trying to get this information out to as many people as possible and are engaging with various groups. So if somebody that you're talking to is interested, just let them know the information or send them to me, and I'd be happy to catch them up on the project. With that, if there are no further comments, we will conclude the meeting today. And like I mentioned, the scoping period is open until August 4th. And if any questions or issues come up, please just let me know. I'll be happy to take them. Thank you so much for attending today and providing your comments. We very much appreciate hearing from all of you and every single person. And we will be talking to you soon. Thank you very much.